She walked to his house carrying his child, and he looked at her stomach and told her she was lying. Naimata had rehearsed every word on the way there. She had prepared for panic. She had prepared for silence. What she had not prepared for was the way Badiru looked at her, not with guilt, not with fear, but with the flat, practiced calm of a man who had already decided what this moment would be before she knocked. "That child is not mine," he said. "Go and find whoever is responsible." Her throat closed. "Badiru," her voice came out smaller than she wanted. "You know that is not true." "I know what I know," he said, "and I am telling you clearly, that has nothing to do with me." He said it the way you say something you have said before, rehearsed, sealed, final. Then he stepped back and closed the door. Naimata stood on those steps with his child growing inside her and nowhere in the world to put what had just happened. She looked down at the ring on her finger, the one he placed there himself 3 months ago, under an evening sky, holding both her hands, saying she was the only future he wanted. She turned and walked away. If that opening just hit you somewhere deep, then you are exactly who this story was made for. Subscribe right now and turn on your notifications. Now let us go back so you understand how she got here. Naimata was a primary school teacher in a quiet town. She woke before sunrise every day and walked to a small school at the edge of town where children ran to hug her. After school, she helped her mother Halimatu sell fruit from a wooden roadside table. Oranges stacked carefully, bananas arranged with the pride of women who had little but kept their standards. It was on that roadside that Badiru first stopped. His car announced him, but what kept Naimata's attention was how he spoke to her mother, calling her Mama before anyone invited him to, asking questions and actually listening to the answers. He became a regular every Saturday, sometimes buying more than he needed, sometimes staying simply to talk, asking about her students, her dreams, her plans for her mother. Naimata kept her walls up. Men from his world did not usually see women from hers, but Badiru was patient. He never spoke down to her, never made her feel that the distance between their lives was something to be ashamed of. Slowly, she opened. She said yes. He took her to restaurants she had only seen in magazines. He spoke about investments, a house, children, and he said she was in all of it. One evening, he took her to meet his mother, Yarinde. The house was grand, polished floors, air that smelled expensive. Yarinde looked at Naimata from head to toe with a smile that stopped at her eyes. The judgment was silent, but Naimata felt every word of it. "She is just in a bad mood," Badiru told her on the way home. "I love you, that is what matters." She believed him. 3 months later, he put a ring on her finger and said she was his future. And then she found out she was pregnant, and she went to him, and he closed the door in her face. Which brings us back to where we started. If this story already has you, like this video right now and drop your country in the comments. We want to know where you are watching from. Naimata pushed open the door of their small one-room home that night. The walls were fading. A bucket sat in the corner for when it rained. It was not much, but Halimatu had always filled it with something that could not be bought. Halimatu was already sitting upright on the thin mattress, back straight, face serious. In her raised hand, a white pregnancy test. She had found it wrapped in cloth beneath the mattress. The silence was the loudest thing in the room. "Who?" Halimatu said. One word. Naimata whispered, But he is saying it is not his. He said I was lying. Halimatu closed her eyes. 3 seconds. When she opened them, something behind them had permanently changed. Tomorrow morning, she said quietly, we are going to his house. Mama, please. But he will not do this to my daughter. The next morning, Halimatu tied her wrapper with the careful tightness of a woman going somewhere to represent something larger than herself. They arrived at Badiru's compound before the heat came. Halimatu knocked without hesitation. Yarinde opened the gate. She looked at them the way someone looks at something unexpected on a clean floor. Badiru appeared behind his mother. He avoided Naimata's eyes. My daughter says she is carrying your child, Halimatu said directly. What do you say? I don't know what she has told you, Badiru said smoothly. That pregnancy has nothing to do with me. Badiru, Naimata stepped forward, her voice shaking. You know the truth. Look at me and say it. He looked at her, and the cruelty was not in his words. It was in how unbothered his eyes were when he said them. I have nothing more to say. Yarinde moved forward, like a closing wall. My son has spoken. Whatever your daughter chose, that is her burden. Halimatu looked at Badiru for a long moment, the look of a woman memorizing a face. God has a long memory, she said quietly. We shall see. She took Naimata's trembling hand. They turned and walked away. The gate closed behind them with a sound like a full stop. That night, Naimata sat on the mattress and said, Mama, I am sorry. Halimatu held her face in both hands. You trusted someone with your heart. That is not a crime. What he did, that is the crime. Her voice became firm. What he has done today will return to him. She pulled her daughter close. Naimata wept from somewhere deep and unguarded, and Halimatu held her through every wave of it without shifting. Comment right now and tell us where you are watching from. Like this video if this story is gripping you, because what happens next changes everything. The town did not let her grieve privately. Whispers followed her everywhere, to school, to the market, to the roadside store. Not whispers of sympathy, whispers of verdict. Is that not the teacher, the one Badiru rejected? She thought carrying his child would tie him down. She heard all of it. She learned to seal her face and keep walking. She kept teaching because she needed the salary. Some mornings, the nausea hit her so hard, she gripped the edge of her classroom desk and breathed through it, while her pupils watched with innocent concern. She smiled at them and continued the lesson. Badiru, meanwhile, was moving fast in the opposite direction. His business was growing. His name was appearing in important circles. Then the announcement came. He was engaged. Her name was Fadumo, daughter of a prominent, wealthy family, educated abroad. Everything Yarinde had been selecting in her mind for years. The engagement party was the kind that people talk about for years. Lights across an entire compound, Yarinde receiving guests in perfectly matched lace, pride worn like a second skin. Naimata heard about it on a Tuesday morning and went into her classroom and taught the lesson. Halimatu's health began sliding quietly. The worry was physical. Naimata could see it settling into her mother's body. One evening after a long day at the store, Halimatu sat down suddenly and pressed her palm flat against her chest. Mama, I am fine. She was not fine. Hospital visits confirmed it. Medicine became another line on a budget already written in deficit. Naimata began tutoring children after school. 3 on weekdays, 2 on Saturdays. She ate once a day when money was tight. She never told her mother. At night, When the room was finally quiet, she would place her hand on her stomach and whisper into the dark. You are not a mistake. Whatever happened around you, you are not a mistake. The night she went into labor, the rain fell like the sky had been storing it for months. The room felt smaller than it had ever been. Halimatu held her hand through the entire thing. Be strong, she kept saying. Stay with me. And then a cry. Small, sharp, filling every corner of the room. A boy. Halimatu held him against her chest. She looked at his tiny face and noticed he had Badiru's eyes. That broke her for exactly 3 seconds. Then it didn't, because she was not holding Badiru's son. She was holding her son, and that was a completely different thing. That was hers. That belonged to no one who ever closed a door on her. She was no longer the woman who had been rejected. She was a mother. Months passed. The baby grew. The money stayed short. The town continued talking. One afternoon in the market with her son tied to her back, she heard 2 women nearby. Is that her? The one Badiru left? Where will she go with a baby and nothing in her hand? Naimata stopped. Something happened in that moment she could not fully explain later. A switch. A quiet, permanent, internal switch. She did not turn around. She did not respond, but something that had been sitting with its head down inside her slowly lifted its head and looked forward. She walked home. She looked around the small room, the faded walls, the bucket in the corner, the medicine on the table, her son sleeping with his fist against his cheek. And a decision formed inside her so clearly, it felt less like a choice and more like a discovery. She could stay here and let this town finish her story. Or she could leave and write it herself. That night, she told Halimatu, Mama, I want to go to the city. Halimatu looked at her for a long time. And the baby? He stays with you. I am not leaving him, I am leaving for him. Her voice cracked slightly and she steadied it. If I stay here, I will always be the woman Badiru rejected. I need somewhere that does not know my name yet. And you will come back? When I have something real to come back with, I promise you on Papa's name. Halimatu searched her daughter's face. The girl she once knew was gone. What sat before her now was something harder, quieter, and unbreakable. Go, she said finally. We will be here. Naimata opened the small metal box beneath the mattress, every coin from teaching and tutoring. She counted it slowly, divided it into 2 equal halves, and pushed one to her mother. For him and for you. And the other half is how I begin. One quiet morning, with one small bag and no farewell, she stood at the door. Her son was in Halimatu's arms, half asleep. Naimata pressed her lips to his forehead and held them there, long enough to memorize the warmth of his skin. I will come back for you, she whispered. I promise. She hugged her mother. Halimatu held on 1 second longer than usual. Then Naimata turned and walked toward the road. The same town that had whispered about her stood silently around her in the early morning light. She was not running from shame. She was walking towards something she could not yet see, but had already decided to reach. The city hit her like a wall. Noise, speed, crowds moving with the absolute certainty of people who know exactly where they are going. Naimata knew nothing except the address of a guest house and how much was in her bag. She found a cracked room in a crowded part of the city. The window would not close properly. At night, the street sounds came through, engines, music, arguments, and she lay awake, reminding herself that discomfort was not failure. She found work at a small cafe on a busy corner, cleaning tables, washing cups, mopping floors before the morning rush. The salary was the kind that made every coin count twice. She accepted it without complaint and arrived every morning before anyone else. She called Halimatu twice a week, always the same first words. How is he? Growing. He has your stubbornness. She sent money home every month. When the month was tight, she sent it first. She walked instead of paying transport. She skipped meals and said nothing about it. But she was not only cleaning tables, she was studying. The businesswoman who handled a difficult client without raising her voice, she studied. The manager who corrected a mistake quickly and without blame, she filed it. The way certain people walk into a room and the whole space adjusts, she studied that. Every day was a quiet classroom, and she was the only student taking notes. 8 months in, on an ordinary afternoon, the cafe door opened and the room shifted. A tall, elegant, older woman stepped out of a black car outside. Simple but expensive, completely composed. The cafe owner straightened without realizing it. She chose a quiet corner table. Naimata approached. "Good afternoon, ma. What can I get for you?" The woman looked up. She did not look through Naimata the way most customers did. She looked directly at her, reading something written on her face. "Black coffee, no sugar." Over the next hour, the woman watched. She watched Naimata handle a rude customer without breaking. She watched her fix a wrong order without blaming anyone. She watched her move through that small cafe with a quiet dignity that had nothing to do with the uniform and everything to do with who she was inside it. At the end of the hour, she rose to leave. She placed money on the table and paused. "What is your name?" "Naimata, ma." "You speak well. Are you studying?" "No, ma. I used to teach primary school." "Used to?" "Yes, ma." "Why did you leave your town?" "Because I needed more for my child." Something moved in the woman's expression. Not pity, recognition. She reached into her bag and placed a small card on the table. "I run a company. We need someone reliable in our administrative office. Come tomorrow morning. This is not charity. It is an opening. What you do with it is up to you." She paused at the door. "Do not waste what I just saw in you." Then she was gone. Naimata stood, holding the card. Her heart was doing something it had not done in a very long time, moving upward instead of downward. The name on the card read Miriam Tukur, founder and chief executive, Tukur Meridian Group. If you are still with us, drop your country in the comments right now. Like this video. We are about to enter the part of this story that will stay with you. Miriam Tukur had built her company from nothing. A small import desk, a borrowed office, a name nobody yet recognized. 20 years later, her company operated across real estate, education, and corporate development. People who worked with her always said the same thing. She sees what you are before you see it yourself. Naimata walked into that glass building the next morning and answered every question without decoration. Her education, her years of teaching, why she left, what she wanted. She told the truth simply and let it be enough. "Junior administrative assistant," Miriam said. "You start at the bottom, you learn everything. If you are what I think you are, you will not stay there long." She was right. Naimata arrived first every morning and left last every night. She took notes on things outside her job description. She asked questions that showed she had already been thinking about the answer. She watched how decisions were made and by whom and why. She made herself indispensable, not by performing, but by being genuinely and completely present in a way that most people in comfortable positions had long stopped being. Miriam noticed. Trust came in layers. Responsibilities grew. Then the morning came when Miriam called her into the office and slid a document across the desk. Naimata read it. A partnership agreement. She looked up. Her face was steady. Inside, she was standing in a room with a faded wall and a bucket in the corner, telling her mother she was sorry. She had come from that room to this desk. "Thank you, Ma," she said. "Do not thank me," Miriam said. "You built this. I only opened the door." 7 years. That is what it cost, and that is what it produced. 7 years of early mornings and late nights, and money sent home before her own needs. 7 years of twice-weekly calls that always began, "How is he?" and always ended with her holding the phone a few seconds longer after the line disconnected. 7 years of watching her son grow through a phone screen, hearing his voice change, building him a future from a city he had never seen. Now, she was coming home, not to the old story, to replace it. The car she drove into town was chosen not to make a statement, but the town received it as one anyway. Villagers stepped back, children pointed, whispers moved faster than the vehicle. Halimatu was sitting outside when the car stopped. Beside her, a boy, tall, straight-backed, bright-eyed, not a baby, not even close. The door opened and Halimatu saw her daughter and made a sound that was not quite a word. They met in the road and held each other while the whole town watched. Then, Naimata turned to her son. She knelt so they were face to face. He looked at her with the combination of shyness and certainty that only exists between people who know each other through phone calls and photographs. She pulled him close. He hesitated 1 second, then his arms came around her and tightened with the grip of a child who has been waiting for this without language for it. "I missed you," she said against his head, "every single day." She took them both to the city within the week, then returned to town with engineers and one instruction: tear it down. The old house, every wall that absorbed the sound of her crying. Build something that tells a different story. Within a month, a new house stood where the old one had been. Modern, solid, elegant, the kind of building that made people stop on the road and look. The news eventually found Badiru and Yarinde. Yarinde calculated quickly. 3 marriages, no children from any of them. Doctors found nothing wrong, and somewhere in that town, a boy was growing up carrying her bloodline. "It is time," she told Badiru, "to take back what belongs to us." Badiru agreed. He had been doing that his whole life. They arrived on the day of the housewarming. Life has a very specific sense of timing when it wants to make a point. The compound was alive. Luxury cars, business partners from the city, music, real laughter. The town had never seen anything like it. Naimata stood at the center of it all, speaking with her guests with the ease of a woman completely at home in her own power. Badiru and Yarinde walked in and stopped. The shock was not hidden well enough. They had expected something modest, something that would let them arrive with the weight of family and bloodline pressing down on a woman they still imagined as the struggling girl from the small room. What they found instead was a woman standing in the middle of her own kingdom. Naimata saw them from across the compound. The past moved through her in one long second. The ring, the door, his face when he said no. She felt all of it. Then she set it down, excused herself from her guests and walked towards them, unhurried, upright, already knowing how this ends. Yarinde spoke first. "We came for our grandson." The compound went quiet. "What grandson?" Naimata said softly. "That boy is Badiru's son and he belongs with his family." "His family," Naimata said, her voice carrying clearly without being raised, "have been his grandmother Halimatu and the mother who worked 7 years to build him a life. Those are his people." Badiru stepped forward. "You know that child carries my blood." 7 years ago," she said, looking directly at him, "you stood at your gate and told me and my mother that the child I was carrying had nothing to do with you. In front of witnesses, you chose that." She stepped closer. "You do not get to wait until he is tall and healthy and his mother is successful and then arrive to collect. Blood is not a property deed. You cannot abandon something and return to claim it when its value has increased." Several of Badiru's business contacts were in that crowd. They heard every word. Badiru and Yarinde left quietly, humiliated, but the damage followed them home and kept going. The story spread beyond the town. Business partners withdrew. If he could deny his own child, what else could he deny? His remaining marriage dissolved, assets divided. The house that once announced his success began announcing something else. Months later, they came back. No entourage, no posture, just 2 people who had run out of everything except honesty. Naimata let them in. They sat across from her in the room she had built. Badiru bowed his head. I was wrong. Everything I have lost, I deserve to lose. I denied my son. I let pride speak where my conscience should have spoken. Yarinde's eyes were wet. I drove my son's decisions and called it love. I destroyed something I had no right to touch. Naimata let the silence sit for a moment. You were my education, she said. I did not know that then. You taught me that a promise without character underneath it is just sound. You taught me that being rejected is not the same as being unworthy. You taught me that the most important thing you can do when someone pushes you down is get up and build something so undeniable that the pushing becomes irrelevant. She looked at Badiru steadily. I forgive you, but forgiveness does not mean returning. What was broken cannot be rebuilt, and I have built something better. She looked at him a moment longer. You may see your son, here with me present, on terms that protect him. He will know the full truth of his story when he is old enough to carry it, without bitterness, because I will not raise a bitter child. She paused. And learn to make your own decisions. A man who lets someone else live his life will keep losing what matters most. When they left, Badiru sat in the car a long time before starting the engine. I am going to adopt, he said. Yarinde looked at him. Not because anyone told me to, because I want to choose presence over pride. I should have done it years ago. Yarinde was quiet. Then, I only wanted the best for you. I know, he said, but you chose for me, and I let you. We both have to grow from that. He started the engine. For the first time in longer than he could remember, he was going somewhere he had chosen himself. And on the other side of town, Naimata sat in the courtyard of the house she built, watching her son run and laugh in the evening light. Halimatu sat beside her with a cup of tea, saying nothing, which was the most peaceful sound in the world. She thought about the gate that closed on her years ago with the sound of a full stop. She had spent so long believing it was an ending. She understood now it was a starting gun. Every closed door contains one. Every person who looks at you and says no is without knowing it firing that gun. The question is never whether it fired. The question is whether you run. Naimata had run, quietly, without applause, without anyone believing in advance that she would make it. She had run on the fuel of a child's forehead warm against her lips on a pale morning and a promise made on her father's name. She had run, and she had arrived. Share this story right now with someone who needs to hear it. Someone standing at a closed gate wondering if this is where their story ends. Like this video, subscribe if you are not yet part of this family. Comment your country below. We see every single one of you and we are grateful. Naimata once stood outside someone else's gate with tears on her face and a child in her body that the man inside had just denied. Now she was the one who decided who came through hers. And that's not just a happy ending. That's a lesson.